Chapter 1. The Perfect Day. The smell of barbecue sauce mixed with the sweet scent of freshly mowed grass as the afternoon sun bathed the backyard in a golden glow. James stood by the grill, flipping marinated ribs with practiced ease, the tongs clicking with each turn. A soft breeze rustled the string lights above the patio, and faint laughter echoed from the open kitchen where family bustled in and out, carrying trays of food and pitchers of lemonade. To anyone looking in from the outside, it was the picture of a perfect American afternoon, a warm day, family gathered, good food, and smiling faces. But James, with his quiet eyes and meticulous hands, knew that perfection was often just well-painted veneer. He glanced around the yard, catching sight of his wife, Megan, arranging cutlery on the buffet table with exaggerated enthusiasm. Her sundress fluttered lightly around her knees, her long hair braided over one shoulder. She looked beautiful. She always had. But lately, there was something behind her smiles, an edge to her tone, a distance in her eyes. Something cold. James turned back to the grill, pressing down the sizzling chicken thighs with a quiet sigh. "Man, you really went all out." A familiar voice called from behind. He looked over his shoulder to see Jake, his best friend since college, approaching with 2 beers. Jake handed him one with a grin that bordered on smug. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with a tan that spoke of weekend boat trips, Jake was every bit the charismatic crowd pleaser. James smiled politely. Figured it was time to get everyone together. Been a while. Too long, Jake agreed, clinking his bottle against James's. You always host the best parties. Just then, Monica, Jake's wife, appeared from the patio doors, her heels clicking lightly on the wooden deck. She was elegant as always, in a navy blue summer dress, her lips painted wine red. "Honey," she called to Jake, "could you help me with the wine boxes?" Jake rolled his eyes playfully. "Married life," he said, nudging James before walking off toward the kitchen with a backward wink. James took a long sip of his beer. The guests were arriving in full now, his parents, her parents, a few old work friends, cousins, and neighbors. Children shrieked with joy as they ran across the grass with balloons, and music played softly from a speaker nestled in a corner of the patio. Megan's laughter rang out then, too loud, too sharp. James turned to see her leaning a little too closely into Jake as he returned with a box of wine. She touched his arm, just for a second, but long enough that James noticed. He frowned, but said nothing. "Dad," came a small voice from behind him. He turned to find Amber, Jake's daughter, hovering near the grill, her dark eyes uncertain. 19 now, she had grown up quiet and intense, often brooding in corners or lost in her headphones. Today, though, she looked uncomfortable, fidgety. "Hey, kiddo," James said, smiling warmly. "You doing okay?" She nodded, but didn't meet his eyes. "Can I get some water?" "Yeah, of course. There's bottled water in the cooler over there." He pointed to the red chest beside the porch. Amber hesitated. "Thanks." Then, under her breath, barely audible, she muttered, "You deserve better, you know." James blinked. "What was that?" She froze. "Nothing," she said quickly, and hurried off. James watched her go, a strange weight settling in his stomach. "Food smells amazing," his mother said, stepping beside him with a plate in hand. "Your father's already asking for seconds, and it's not even the main course yet." He chuckled softly. Tell him to pace himself. But his eyes flicked again to Megan, who was now opening wine beside Jake. Her fingers grazed his as they uncorked the bottle. Jake said something, and she threw her head back, laughing as though it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. James's jaw tensed. "James?" his mother asked, noticing the change in his face. He forced a smile, just watching the chaos. "This is what happens when you invite too many people." His mother touched his arm. "She seems happy today." "That's good, right?" "Sure," he lied. Later, as guests found seats along the long wooden tables James had built by hand last summer, he moved from group to group, checking on drinks, making small talk, shaking hands. But his focus never drifted far from Megan and Jake. There were whispers, short glances exchanged when they thought no one was looking. Monica stood stiffly beside Jake, her smile tight, her hand never resting on his arm like it used to. Amber barely touched her food and avoided both her parents. And Megan, she floated through the crowd with a glowing face, but not once did she touch James or ask him if he was okay, or even meet his gaze for more than a passing second. It wasn't hate. It was worse, it was indifference. A casual disregard for the man who had built this home, who paid the mortgage, who planned this day to celebrate everyone he cared about. Still, James smiled through it. He kept grilling, kept serving, kept pouring drinks. Because if today was going to be remembered, he needed it to be perfect for now. As the sun dipped lower and cast the yard in a warm amber hue, laughter echoed louder, plates clattered, and glasses clinked. From across the lawn, Megan caught his eye for just a moment. She smiled, slow and secretive. And James, for the first time in weeks, smiled back, because he knew something no one else did. Something was coming. But not yet. Not just yet. Chapter 2. Cracks in the foundation. The first sign had been subtle, almost too subtle to register. Megan had always been warm, not overly affectionate, but consistently present. She used to smile when James walked through the door after work. Sometimes she'd touch his shoulder absent-mindedly as she passed behind him in the kitchen. They had routines, comfort, but about a year ago, the warmth had begun to cool. James first noticed it on a Tuesday. He'd come home from work early, surprising her. The house was quiet, too quiet. He found her on the couch, half-dressed, startled by his arrival. Her phone slipped under a pillow in one quick, rehearsed motion. She smiled too fast. Her laugh sounded hollow. "I thought you were working late today," she said, rising to kiss his cheek. "I was supposed to. Meeting got canceled." She nodded, moving past him toward the kitchen. "Want pasta for dinner?" He stood there for a moment, looking at the pillow, wondering why her hand had trembled just slightly. That night, she kept her phone screen face down. From there, it snowballed. She began going out more, book club meetings, work dinners, girls' nights that started late and ended later. James wanted to trust her. He always had. But trust doesn't blind you. It just makes you hesitate before asking the question you're afraid to know the answer to. At first, he said nothing. Then came the passwords. Megan had never cared much about digital privacy. They'd shared the same Wi-Fi password since college, knew each other's pins out of habit. But suddenly, her phone required a face scan, and her laptop had a new login screen. IT said I had to update for work. She shrugged when he asked. James didn't argue, but a knot had begun to form in his stomach. It twisted tighter the night Jake showed up with a bottle of wine. "Thought I'd drop by. Megan said you were working late," Jake had said casually. James looked at the clock. "I left early again." "Meeting canceled." Jake's smile flickered for a split second. "Well, perfect timing." Megan emerged from the kitchen wearing the dress she usually saved for anniversaries. Her hair was curled. Lipstick, rare for a weekday, was freshly applied. Jake whistled. "Damn, Megan, you look like you stepped off a movie set." She laughed, light and melodic, and leaned to kiss his cheek. "Flatterer." James forced a smile and said nothing. The knot in his stomach pulled tight enough to ache. Over the next few weeks, Jake was around more and more. He'd stop by unannounced, offer to help Megan with things, fixing the leaky faucet, hanging new lights, even trimming the hedge as a favor. He brought her books. He knew her favorite coffee. And Megan, she responded with little giggles, inside jokes, and glances that lingered too long. James began to notice the silence between them, him and Megan, growing louder with every passing day. She stopped asking about his work. She stopped telling him how hers was going. Their dinners became wordless. When he reached for her hand, sometimes she flinched like the touch startled her. He lay awake at night while she scrolled on her phone, the glow lighting her face, her fingers moving swiftly across the screen. If he stirred, she'd quickly lock it and turn away. One night, unable to bear the weight of suspicion any longer, he quietly slipped out of bed and into the spare room where his old laptop sat. "Am I losing my mind?" He typed into a search engine. But he wasn't. He was losing something real, and it was slipping through his fingers faster each day. That was the night he made the decision. James walked into a small electronics store 2 towns over the next morning. He wore sunglasses, a hoodie. He paid in cash. The man behind the counter didn't ask questions as he slid a sleek black recorder across the counter. Battery lasts 40 hours. Stick it under a car seat, couch, kitchen table. Sounds crystal clear. James nodded. What about phones? Got this, the man said, handing him a small USB stick. Install it, and you'll see everything. Texts, emails, deleted files, GPS. James left the store with a bag tucked deep into his coat, his pulse pounding harder than he expected. He waited 3 days. On a Thursday morning, while Megan was in the shower, he connected the spyware to her laptop. It took 90 seconds. She came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, humming, completely unaware that everything she typed from now on would land in a secure folder on his private cloud account. Next, he slid the recorder under the kitchen cabinet near the dining table, right where Jake always sat when he visited. He tested it that night. It picked up a whisper from across the room. In the days that followed, James became two men. One was the quiet, devoted husband, smiling, grilling, showing up to events, holding Megan's hand when needed. The other was the silent watcher, downloading files at midnight, listening to hushed conversations on playback, watching text logs unfold like daggers across the screen. Megan's behavior made sense now. Too much sense. One night, she typed, "Jake said you looked pathetic tonight. You didn't even notice the lipstick on my neck." James read the message 10 times before closing the laptop. His hands shook, but his mind was clear. He started organizing everything, labeling audio files by date, screenshots by category. He logged timestamps, cross-referenced them with Megan's calendar excuses. Every lie had a file. Every betrayal had a folder. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He documented, because when the time came, he wouldn't confront. He'd expose. Chapter 3. The Revelation Plan. James sat in his parked car, just a few blocks from his office, staring blankly at the gray dashboard. The engine was running, but he wasn't moving. His thoughts churned with every screenshot, every whispered recording that now sat in a carefully labeled hard drive tucked in a fireproof lockbox under the floorboards of the garage. He had evidence. He had facts. But evidence alone wasn't justice. He needed precision. He needed a plan. So he made a call. "Mr. Ellis?" A calm voice answered after 2 rings. "Yeah, this is James Hale. I was given your number by a friend. Said you specialize in discreet matters." The man chuckled dryly. "Discretion's my specialty. How can I help?" "I think my wife is cheating," James said flatly. "But I don't want to confront her. Not yet. I want you to help me prove it. Completely. Legally." The voice on the line paused, then said, "Come to my office. Bring anything you already have. We'll start from there." The office was in a nondescript building across town, behind a pizza shop and next to a vape store. Inside, however, it was quiet and sterile. Clean desk, dim lighting, soundproof walls. The man who greeted him was late 40s, salt and pepper beard, sharp blue eyes. He introduced himself simply as Mason, no last name given. James laid out his evidence. Audio recordings, spyware logs, screenshots of text between Megan and Jake, some crude, some intimate, others blatantly mocking James himself. Mason examined everything with a cold, professional detachment. "You've done half my work already," he said finally. "But you want more, don't you?" James nodded. "I want every rock turned over. I want every secret she thinks she buried to come up in flames." Mason tapped his finger on the folder. "I'll set up GPS trackers. One for a car, one for Jake's. I have a guy for phones. You'll need someone better than spyware. Someone who can break into encrypted apps without leaving a trail. You trust him?" James asked. He used to work in cybercrime division for the state. Got tired of red tape. "He's expensive, but surgical." "Do it," James said without hesitation. Over the next 2 weeks, James became a phantom in his own life. He woke beside Megan and kissed her good morning. He laughed with Jake at weekend cookouts. He chatted with Monica about work and asked Amber how school was going, all while Mason sent him daily updates. Megan had 3 book clubs scheduled in the month. None of them had book-related locations. Instead, she was tracked to a high-end hotel outside the city, a spa with a reputation for off-the-record hookups, and most damning of all, a house linked to what Mason called open marriage clubs. Photos came in time-stamped. Megan dressed in different outfits, entering these locations with other men, not just Jake. One of them was an older executive from her company. Another, a man half her age who appeared more than once on different nights. Mason called him one evening, voice tighter than usual. "We pulled some deleted chat logs from an encrypted folder on her phone," he said. "Your wife's been involved in what they call consensual non-monogamy groups, but she never listed you as a participant." James clenched the armrest of his couch. "Meaning she signed us both up without my consent?" "Exactly. She refers to you as unaware or emotionally incapable of understanding alternative intimacy models. She's been telling people you agreed years ago, but mentally checked out." James felt bile rising in his throat. "She dragged my name into her lies. That's not all," Mason added carefully. "Medical records, too." James sat up. "What?" "She was tested for HSV 6 months ago. Positive. She filled a prescription for antivirals and kept it under a pseudonym. We pulled the pharmacy logs. She's been taking them in cycles." James's hands trembled. "I tested positive last month," he whispered. "I thought it was stress. The doctor said it could have been dormant. I never questioned it." "She gave it to you," Mason said. "She knew, and she said nothing." James stood in his living room, staring at a framed photo of their wedding day. Megan's smile beamed from beneath her veil, her hands in his. He remembered her vow. "You are my safe place." It was now a cruel punchline. Later that week, James was reviewing new footage from the tech expert, camera clips of Jake's truck pulling into their driveway at odd hours, sometimes when James was at work. In one clip, Megan stood at the door in a robe, let Jake in without a word, and kissed him before they even crossed the threshold. It wasn't rage James felt anymore. It was clarity. They thought he was a fool, that he was asleep at the wheel while they built their little kingdom of lust and betrayal under his roof. But they didn't know he was awake. And then came the twist he never expected. It came from Amber. Mason had extended the investigation to include Jake's phone records, trying to build a timeline that matched Megan's secret rendezvous. While tracing certain message threads, Mason stumbled across deleted conversations, one of which was between Jake and Amber. But the tone wasn't friendly. It was hostile. "Amber, you think I won't tell Mom? You think I care about your reputation?" "Jake, keep your mouth shut. You know what I could do to you legally if this goes public." "Amber, then maybe I tell Megan instead. She deserves to know what kind of man she's screwing." James read the message thread 5 times. He stared at the timestamps, the escalation in tone. There was no outright confession, but enough to imply that something inappropriate, deeply wrong, had occurred between Jake and someone connected to Amber. A follow-up video message from Amber, partially recovered, showed her saying, "You think I need your money? I was going to destroy you anyway. Go to hell." James sat there in stunned silence. Jake wasn't just a backstabbing friend. He was hiding secrets even darker than infidelity. And somehow, Amber, bruised, broken, but still walking upright in his house, was the only one who seemed to see what was really going on. Chapter 4. Fire in the Blood. James sat in the dark, a glass of untouched whiskey sweating in his hand. Rain tapped against the window in a quiet rhythm, like the seconds ticking down to something inevitable. He had everything: photos, texts, videos. Undeniable proof of betrayal. But he hadn't moved. Not yet. The truth was, a part of him wanted to pack a bag, leave a note, and disappear. Let Megan and Jake rot in their pit of lies. Let them think they'd won. He could find peace somewhere else, somewhere far from the ruins of the life they shattered. But peace without justice? It felt like surrender. He stood, dumped the whiskey into the sink, and turned toward the box in his closet, the one marked receipts, though it held something far more damning now. Inside was a thick manila folder with 3 words written in bold, black ink. Final day plan. The next morning, he met Mason at a discreet diner off Highway 5. No cameras, no questions. "I want it airtight," James said as they slid into a booth. No holes. No chance for them to twist anything. Mason sipped his coffee, then nodded. "We're nearly there. But I need to tell you something. It's worse than we thought." James froze. "Ow." Mason slid a new file across the table. Inside were screenshots, grainy but readable, of Jake chatting with someone named Kayla on a private messaging app. "Kayla, you said I was mature for my age. You lied." "Jake, Don't get dramatic. You knew what you were doing. Kayla, I was 16. You're my best friend's dad. James clenched his jaw so tightly his ears rang. Mason continued, voice low. Kayla is Amber's classmate. We verified it. Her birthday confirms she was a minor at the time of those messages. There's more. Photos. Explicit ones. James closed the folder. Jesus Christ, he's been careful, Mason said. But not enough. The backups from his cloud server gave us enough. The girl hasn't come forward officially yet, but with this, we have grounds to open a confidential police report. James stared at his reflection in the diner window. His face was calm, too calm. Beneath that, a storm churned. How do I file it without them catching wind? I have a contact at the department, Mason said. He'll flag it as under investigation, quietly. They'll begin surveillance and gather more. You won't be involved publicly until you want to be. James nodded slowly. Do it. That night, James sat at his desk, assembling his masterpiece. On one screen, a spreadsheet labeled Incident Log, listing dates, names, locations, cross-referenced with screenshots and timestamp photos. On another screen, folders titled Megan Texts, Jake Messages, GPS logs, and hidden camera footage. He clicked through each one, checking for gaps. Then he opened a recorder and began speaking, his voice calm, precise. This is James Hale. The following material has been collected over the course of 3 months. The subjects of this investigation are Megan Hale and Jacob Morris. Consent was not given for the extramarital activities documented here. Further evidence includes proof of potential criminal behavior involving a minor. All material is dated, verified, and securely backed up in 3 separate encrypted locations. He stopped the recording and saved it. Then he opened a new document titled Civil Filing Drafts. One was for alienation of affection, a rarely used but still legal lawsuit in their state, aimed at Jake. Another was a marital tort claim, citing emotional distress, fraud, and the willful transmission of a sexually transmitted disease. He smiled bitterly as he added the final clause. Defendant knowingly exposed plaintiff to an incurable condition, having concealed her diagnosis and engaged in continued sexual relations with multiple partners. The next morning, James made his way to a downtown law firm. He walked into the sterile glass lobby, folder in hand, and met with attorney Rachel Kent, one of the state's top civil litigators. She flipped through his evidence in silence, her expression sharpening with every page. I don't think I've ever seen this level of preparation from a client, she finally said. Is it enough? James asked. It's more than enough, she said. We'll file these quietly. No one will know until the papers are served, and even then, it'll look like nothing more than a procedural notice until they open them. But I assume you don't want it to stay quiet forever. No, James said. I want it loud. But not yet. Over the next few days, James scheduled meetings in secret, one with a digital forensic analyst, another with a notary, and finally one with Detective Kieran from Mason's contact list. Each step added another lock to the vault of evidence he'd built. Each name on each form was another nail in the coffin. He knew how to be patient. He had let this infection grow for long enough. Now, he would bleed it out publicly. He just needed the right stage. The perfect moment. One evening, as Megan scrolled through Pinterest on the couch, she looked up casually and said, I was thinking, what if we host a big summer barbecue this month? You know, get everyone together. We haven't done one in a while. James didn't blink. Sure, he said, smiling. That sounds perfect. She beamed, completely unaware. We can do it here, in the backyard. Invite the whole family. Your parents, my parents, Jake and Monica. Maybe even Amber's friends. He leaned in, kissed her forehead gently. I'll handle the food. She giggled. You always make the best ribs. Only the best, he said softly. Inside, his pulse thumped like war drums. The date was set. The guests would come. And when they did, everything would come to light, not in rage, not in chaos, but with silence, with truth, with justice. Chapter 5. The party begins. The sky was a canvas of clear blue, brushed with soft strokes of cotton clouds. A warm summer breeze stirred the trees lining the yard, and the scent of charcoal smoke, sizzling meat, and fresh-cut grass mingled in the air like perfume. James stood by the grill, tongs in hand, flipping steaks with methodical precision. He wore a navy apron that read Grill King, the same one Megan had bought him years ago. His movements were smooth, almost carefree. On the surface, he was the perfect host, smiling, laughing, welcoming everyone as they arrived. But under the surface, every second ticked like a fuse burning down to something unstoppable. Tiny, almost invisible, was the mic taped beneath his shirt, connected to a discreet transmitter in his pocket. It hummed with silent purpose. His phone, tucked on a patio shelf beneath a napkin holder, recorded video continuously. And tucked beneath the garden table umbrella, angled at just the right spot, was a hidden GoPro. The stage was set. "Hey man," Jake's voice boomed as he approached from the side gate, carrying a cooler. Monica followed behind him, already sipping white wine. Jake wore a polo shirt and cargo shorts. His trademark smug grin stretched across his face like a badge. James smiled. "There he is. You bring the beer." Jake lifted the cooler. "Only the best for you, brother." James clapped him on the shoulder, suppressing the urge to wipe his hand. "Appreciate it. Smells amazing out here," Monica said, looking around the yard. "This place looks even better than I remembered." James has been working on it non-stop. Megan chimed in as she approached, wearing a floral sundress that fluttered slightly in the breeze. "He's obsessed with having it perfect." She gave James a peck on the cheek, but it was performative. He felt nothing. "Looks like you outdid yourself," Jake said, looking around. "You sure you didn't hire a caterer?" James chuckled. "Just me, the grill, and a bit of obsession, apparently." Guests continued to trickle in, cousins, co-workers, old friends. The yard buzzed with chatter and the clinking of glasses. Kids darted through the grass with foam water guns. James's father stood by the garden, telling war stories to Monica's uncle. Laughter spilled over the fence and echoed against the house. And yet, there was something electric beneath it all. Megan moved through the crowd like a debutante, her energy unusually giddy. She tossed her hair too often. Her laughter rang just a bit too loudly. Every now and then, James caught her stealing glances at Jake, furtive, charged. Jake, in turn, seemed puffed with confidence, grinning as though he were the star of the show. When James passed him a beer, their hands brushed for a second. Jake leaned in slightly and whispered, "Man, if only you knew how good this day is about to get." James raised his glass. "Oh, I got a pretty good idea." Across the yard, Amber stood near the corner of the fence, arms crossed, staring into her drink. Her body language was tight, rigid. She hadn't spoken a word to her father since arriving. James made his way over, offering a soda. "Hey, Amber, you all right?" She hesitated before taking it. "Yeah, just waiting for this thing to be over." "Family gatherings will do that," he said with a soft smile. She looked up at him, studying his expression. "You don't seem surprised." "About what?" She lowered her voice. "Whatever's about to happen. I can feel it. Something's coming." James met her eyes. Sometimes, people only change when the truth shows up. But it's got to come dressed for the occasion. Amber looked down again, nodding slowly. Behind them, a cheer went up near the patio. Megan had taken the stage, if one could call the deck steps that. She held a wine glass high, beaming with excitement. James felt a ripple pass through the crowd. The clinking of forks slowed. Conversations quieted. "She's gearing up," Monica murmured beside Jake, eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Speech time?" Jake asked, smirking. Megan cleared her throat. "I just want to thank everyone for coming today. It means the world to me and to James. He's worked so hard to make this day perfect." James smiled, lifting his glass slightly. "Happy to do it." She turned back to the crowd. "I also have something special to share, but I'm going to save that for a little later." A few people cheered and hooped. "Tease," someone called out. Megan laughed, waving it off. "You'll want to be near the patio when I do. Trust me." Jake leaned toward Monica and whispered something. She giggled, but Amber's eyes darkened further. James made his way back to the grill, rotating a skewer of kebabs with steady hands. His heart thumped quietly, steady as a war drum. The meat hissed, the fire crackled. Every move he made, every smile he offered, every beer he handed out. It was all part of the theater. Inside, a pressure was building. The guests were laughing. Megan was glowing. Jake was cocky. Amber was watching. And James was ready. Soon, very soon, the curtain would rise. Chapter 6. The Bombshell. The sun dipped just below the tree line, casting a golden hue across the backyard. Lanterns flickered to life as dusk settled in, throwing warm light over the gathered guests. Laughter echoed from one corner, while clinks of glasses rang out from another. The party had grown looser, louder. People were 3 drinks deep and leaning into conversations. James stood near the patio table, refilling ice in a cooler. From the corner of his eye, he saw Megan glide to the center of the deck. Her wine glass gleamed in her hand as she tapped it with a silver fork. Ting, ting, ting. The crowd's chatter faded. Everyone turned toward her. She smiled, that radiant, trained smile that had once enchanted him. But tonight, James saw it differently, more like a weapon being drawn. "I have an announcement," Megan said, her voice raised with excitement. "A very special one." The guests leaned in, intrigued. Monica gasped playfully. Jake had his arm around her, but was staring at Megan like a man who'd already peeked at the gift before the party. James wiped his hands on a towel and walked closer, keeping his expression neutral. Amber, still in the shadows, pressed her lips into a thin line and folded her arms. Megan beamed, raising her glass. "Today isn't just about our beautiful home or this incredible party that James worked so hard for. It's about a new chapter, a new beginning, one that I'm thrilled to share." She placed a hand gently on her stomach. "I'm pregnant," she declared, her voice trembling with glee. "We're having a baby." Gasps rippled through the crowd. James didn't move. Jake stepped forward, wrapping an arm around Megan. "Not just any baby," he said with a grin that could slice steel. "My baby." There was a beat of stunned silence. Then laughter. Awkward clapping. A few people whistled. One of Megan's friends shrieked. "Wait, what? Oh my God." Monica blinked, her smile faltering. Megan chuckled. I know. It's unexpected. But Jake and we've fallen in love. And we wanted to wait for the right time to share." Someone mumbled, "Is this like an open thing?" Jake nodded proudly. "We're all adults. No secrets anymore." A few of Megan's younger co-workers began clapping. A cousin raised his beer in a toast. Modern love, right? But not everyone looked convinced. James's father looked frozen. Monica's mouth had dropped open. Amber looked physically ill. Jake turned toward James now, eyes glittering with cruelty. He stepped forward, only a foot away. "You know what's funny, Dave?" he said, voice loud enough for all to hear. "I've been doing your wife for over a year. Right under your nose. And you didn't even notice." A wave of shocked murmurs spread like fire through the group. James looked him in the eye, unmoved. Still, calm. He took a sip from his drink. Jake smirked wider, emboldened. "Man, you're really something. Oblivious as hell. While you were working late, she was riding me. While you were building this stupid patio, she was sneaking into my house." "Jake," Monica whispered, stepping back. "I mean, come on," Jake continued. "You didn't suspect anything? Not once." Megan laughed, nervously beside him, holding his arm. "Jake, maybe don't." Jake held up a hand, silencing her. "You're pathetic, James," he said. "You're not even angry. You're just standing there like a little." James tilted his head. Slowly, he raised his glass in a toast. His eyes met Jake's. And then, with a quiet smile, he spoke. "I'm listening." Chapter 7. The Toast That Shattered Them. The air held still, as if the evening had stopped breathing. James's glass hovered midair, its rim catching the dying sunlight in a sharp glint. All eyes had turned to him, expecting either collapse or fury. But what they saw was unnerving, a smile. Measured, cold, unflinching. James looked straight into Jake's cocky grin and said clearly, voice steady as a scalpel. "Just like I did with your daughter, Jake. You're gonna be a granddad surprise." The silence was total, like someone had vacuumed the sound from the earth. Monica blinked rapidly, as if trying to process the words. Her lips parted, her breath hitched. What did he just say?" Megan's face contorted. Confusion. Then horror. Jake laughed, too loud, too fake. That's not funny, man. James tilted his head. I wasn't joking. Amber, standing near the edge of the garden, suddenly dropped her red Solo cup. It hit the grass with a soft thud, unnoticed by anyone but her. Her mouth opened in a shaky whisper, "Oh my God," before she bolted, running across the lawn barefoot, shoulder-checking a lawn chair in her blind panic. "Amber," Monica screamed, turning toward her daughter. But she didn't make it 2 steps. Monica's knees buckled. Her hands reached for something invisible in the air, and she collapsed, eyes rolling back as she crumpled into the grass like a puppet with cut strings. Gasps exploded from the crowd. Someone screamed. A wine glass shattered. Jake's smirk disappeared. His jaw clenched. "You're lying," he growled, stepping forward. James calmly set his untouched drink on the nearby table. She was lonely, angry. "You forgot her birthday. Twice. You son of a—" Jake charged. But James had anticipated it. He sidestepped just in time. Jake's lunge stumbled forward into the buffet table, sending a tray of ribs crashing to the ground. Plates shattered. A few guests screamed and scrambled away. James's voice cut through the chaos like a scalpel. "Touch me," he said, "and you'll be in jail before midnight." Jake turned slowly, panting, face red with rage. "You think this is funny? That you can just—" "Funny?" James's eyes hardened, no hint of the earlier smile. "No, but fair? Oh, absolutely." Megan moved between them, grabbing Jake's arm. "Jake, stop. Let's just go." "He's bluffing. He's just bitter." "You sure about that?" James asked, pulling out his phone from his back pocket. He tapped the screen once, held it up to her face. A faint voice crackled out, Amber's voice. "He thinks he's so perfect, but he doesn't know anything. If my dad keeps treating me like trash, I swear to God I'll burn it all down." Megan's mouth opened, then closed. Her face went pale. James lowered the phone, not bothering to play the rest. "Not yet." Jake's hands clenched into fists. "You recorded my daughter?" "I protected her," James replied coolly, "from a man who failed her." Jake's nostrils flared, but his eyes flicked to the guests around him, dozens of witnesses. Phones raised. "Cameras out." "Try me," James added. "Take one more step." Jake stood frozen, body trembling. But he didn't move. Behind them, Monica groaned from the grass, slowly regaining consciousness. Someone rushed over to help her up. Megan looked at James with a mixture of rage and desperation. "You planned this," she spat. "You planned this whole damn thing." James finally met her gaze directly. "Correct." Then he turned to the crowd, still stunned, unsure whether they'd just witnessed theater, madness, or the collapse of something sacred. He didn't explain. He didn't need to, because the damage had already been done, and the storm hadn't even started yet. Chapter 8. Lights, camera arrest. The sound of distant sirens sliced through the stunned silence like a blade. At first, no one moved. Then a few guests turned their heads toward the road beyond the backyard fence. Red and blue lights began flashing in the distance, growing larger, louder. James didn't flinch. Jake did. "What the hell is this?" he hissed, voice shaking now. "What did you do?" James didn't respond. He simply stepped aside, making space on the deck as the wooden gate burst open and 2 uniformed officers strode in, followed by a pair of plainclothes detectives, Detective Mason and Detective Harper. Both looked grim, serious, and fully informed. The murmuring crowd instinctively stepped back, making a path. Megan stepped forward, eyes wide. "Officers, this must be some kind of mistake." "Megan Chambers?" Detective Harper asked. Megan nodded slowly. "Yes. You're under arrest for reckless endangerment and knowingly transmitting a communicable disease without disclosure," Harper stated, removing a folded document from her jacket. "We have a warrant based on medical records, witness statements, and secured messages obtained from your devices." James's face remained unreadable. Megan blinked in confusion, then stumbled back a step. "Wait, what? What are you talking about? That's insane. I didn't even know. You tested positive for HSV-2 in June," Harper continued. "Your husband tested negative 3 weeks prior. You transmitted the virus to him without his knowledge or consent. Under state law, that qualifies as a criminal offense." Gasps spread across the yard again. One of Megan's aunts clapped a hand over her mouth. Monica, barely able to stand, whispered, "Oh my God." James quietly stepped forward, placing a neatly labeled flash drive in Detective Mason's hand. "Encrypted," James said. "Includes chat logs, date-stamped medical files, synced phone data, audio recordings of 2 separate confessions, and screenshots from secret messaging apps." Megan's face turned white. She turned to Jake like he might save her. Jake's hands were clenched. His jaw moved, but no words came. This is crazy," Megan stammered. "You can't do this in front of everyone." James's voice was calm. "You did worse. In front of everyone." Harper pulled Megan's hands behind her back. "You have the right to remain silent. Don't touch me." Megan shrieked, struggling as the cuffs snapped shut. "You can't, Jake. Jake, do something." Jake looked like he'd been struck in the head. His mouth opened, but no words came. He didn't move. As Megan was escorted out through the gate, crying and shouting, Detective Mason turned toward Jake. "Jacob Danner?" Jake blinked. "What now?" "You are being detained in connection with an ongoing investigation into an alleged statutory offense involving a minor friend of your daughter. There is supporting testimony and image metadata submitted as evidence." Jake went rigid. "That's bull. Amber's lying. She's been lying for months." James shook his head. "Not Amber. Her friend. The one you picked up after that house party last fall. The one you thought no one saw." Mason held up another flash drive, identical to the one James handed Harper. Multiple sources confirm a pattern. GPS logs. Messages from a now-recovered burner phone. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's Nest cam. A statement from the girl's parents. Jake's voice cracked. "This is a setup. He's framing me. He planned this whole thing." Harper returned, wiping her hands with a napkin someone offered. "He didn't need plan it. You did that part all on your own." Jake turned toward the guests, searching for backup, for someone to speak up. Monica backed away from him. His own cousin turned and walked toward the driveway, shaking his head. James took 2 more flash drives from his inner pocket. One he handed to Megan's sister. The other he placed in Monica's trembling hand. "They each contain a copy of everything," James said gently. "You deserve to know what was happening, what they really were." Monica's hand shook as she accepted it. Jake finally exploded. "You vindictive piece of... You were supposed to be my best friend." James stepped forward, looking him squarely in the eyes. "You stopped being my friend the moment you stepped in my bed while I wasn't in it." Jake lunged again, but this time, the officers were ready. Mason caught his arm mid-swing and twisted it down in one swift, brutal motion. Jake howled, but it was too late. The cuffs clicked shut. His shoulders were pulled back, rage melting into shame, into something pathetic. "You'll regret this," he snarled at James. "You think this makes you a man?" "No," James replied, voice steel. "But it makes me free." Jake was dragged toward the gate. People started whispering. Then phones went up, photos, videos, calls. One of James's uncles muttered, "Jesus Christ," before hugging his wife and shaking his head in disbelief. Megan's mother sank into a chair, crying. Her father just stared into space, face hollow. As the patrol cars pulled away with Megan and Jake inside, red and blue lights still flashing, James remained where he was, silent, still, but utterly composed. Then he walked back to the center of the lawn, picked up his glass, and raised it, not in celebration, but in closure. The reckoning had only just begun. Chapter 9. Ashes of Marriage. The morning after the arrests, the sun rose cold and unfeeling over the city, casting harsh light on a life that was already crumbling. Megan sat alone on the edge of their once cheerful bed, the silence of the house pressing in on her like a suffocating weight. Her phone buzzed repeatedly on the nightstand, texts, emails, calls, but she couldn't bring herself to look. When she finally reached for it, the first message that caught her eye was from her boss. "Megan, due to recent media attention and company policy, we have to let you go effective immediately. Please collect your personal belongings from the office within 24 hours. Megan stared at the screen, her fingers trembling. She wanted to scream, to curse, but all that came out was a whisper. No, not like this. She had worked there for nearly a decade, dedicated, loyal. And now, all that disappeared in an instant. The public exposure had spread like wildfire, social media feeding on every sordid detail, every leaked screenshot. Her phone buzzed again, this time from her closest friends. The messages were curt, cold. "Megan, I can't be associated with this anymore. We need space. Please respect that. Sorry, but this is too much. Take care." Megan's chest tightened. Tears welled and spilled down her cheeks. She swiped through countless messages until only silence remained. A knock at the front door startled her. Through the peephole, she saw her mother and father standing stiffly, expressions blank and guarded. "Mom, Dad," Megan said, voice cracking. Her mother avoided eye contact. "Megan, we just can't support what you've done. The betrayal, the lies. How could you?" Her father's jaw clenched. "You've brought shame to this family. We don't know who you are anymore." Megan dropped her gaze, unable to meet their eyes. "I never meant for this. I didn't think." Her mother shook her head. "You didn't think about anyone but yourself. We're done." With that, they turned away, leaving Megan standing alone in the foyer, the sound of the closing door echoing like a verdict. Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, Monica sat at the dining table with her lawyer, a weary look etched deeply into her face. The recent revelations had rocked her world to its core. Her hands trembled slightly as she signed the divorce papers. The house, the custody of Amber, it was all coming down to pieces, but Monica was resolute. "I'm sorry it had to be like this," her lawyer said softly, sliding a folder across the table. Monica nodded, swallowing hard. "I never thought he was capable of something like this, but it's over. I'm done." Amber had already moved out, refusing to see her father after the scandal broke. She sent a single message to Monica that morning. "I'm not coming back. Not ever." Monica wiped a tear away. She's angry. Hurt. I don't blame her. Back at James's place, news outlets buzzed incessantly, the scandal dominating headlines. Jake's name was plastered across every tabloid and news site, alongside graphic accusations and legal filings. Civil suits poured in, alienation of affection, defamation, and more. The layers of his deception were unraveling in courtrooms and social media alike. James, however, kept a quiet dignity. He didn't post on social media. He didn't engage with reporters. Instead, he focused on rebuilding his life. He met quietly with his lawyer, ensuring every piece of evidence was cataloged and ready for the coming battles. When asked why he was so composed, James simply said, "The truth will always come out. I'm just making sure it does." One afternoon, James received a call from Monica. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly, "for everything you've done. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but you gave Amber the courage to leave that toxic environment. For that, I'm grateful." James smiled faintly. "She's strong. She'll be okay." Monica sighed. "It's going to be a long road for all of us. But this was necessary." Meanwhile, Megan's world grew smaller by the day. Her social circle vanished. Former friends blocked her on every platform. The family she once took for granted had turned their backs. She moved into a small apartment on the edge of the city, barely able to pay rent on what little severance she received. One evening, alone and exhausted, Megan scrolled through social media, only to find her face paired with cruel memes, hateful comments, and merciless mockery. Her phone rang again. It was Amber. Megan's heart pounded, but the call went to voicemail. Megan left a trembling message. "Amber, please, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." Days passed with no reply. At Jake's trial preparations, the weight of his choices pressed down hard. His family fractured beyond repair. Monica was firm on the divorce. Amber had cut off all contact, and the courts were preparing to deal with the full extent of his crimes. The ashes of the marriage lay scattered, burnt by betrayal, deception, and shattered trust. Megan had lost everything: job, friends, family, respect. Jake was crumbling under the weight of impending legal ruin and family collapse. Amber was seeking distance, healing in no-contact silence. And James was finally free, standing alone but unbroken. Chapter 10. A Man Reborn. The courthouse steps were bathed in late afternoon sunlight as James exhaled deeply, watching the final papers being signed. The divorce was official. The legal battles were over. The weight that had crushed him for months finally lifted, if only slightly. He folded the documents carefully and tucked them into his briefcase. There was no celebration, no triumphal gesture, just a quiet sense of closure. He had won more than just a legal victory. He had reclaimed his life. Walking away from the courthouse, James felt a strange lightness he hadn't known for years. For so long, he had been trapped in a cycle of betrayal and anger, but now the chains were broken. The city buzzed around him, oblivious to the storm he'd weathered. He looked up at the sky, blue and endless, and allowed himself a small, tentative smile. Back at his apartment, James pulled open a dusty box shoved into the back of his closet. It was filled with old treasures, fishing gear, a guitar, and a stack of dog-eared books. These were the fragments of the man he once was, the man before the lies. He lifted the guitar, fingers running lightly over the worn strings. It felt foreign, yet comforting in his hands. That night, for the first time in months, he strummed a few tentative chords. The music was rusty, but it was his. Days turned into weeks, and James made a conscious effort to rebuild himself piece by piece. He signed up at the local gym, feeling awkward at first among the machines and sweating strangers, but he welcomed the physical challenge. The exercise helped release the tension coiled tight inside him, the bitterness and heartbreak. He also reconnected with his passion for photography, carrying his camera on quiet walks through the park, capturing light and shadow. The subtle beauty in ordinary moments gave him a new way to see the world and himself. One crisp morning, James sat in a sterile clinic room, nervously tapping his fingers on the tabletop. The nurse entered with his test results. "You're clear," she said gently. "No signs of infection or illness. Physically, you're healthy." James nodded, relief washing over him. Months ago, the thought of this moment had terrified him. Over the following months, James committed himself to healing, not just his body, but his spirit. He sought counseling to process the betrayal and the loss. The sessions were raw and exhausting, but gradually they brought clarity. He learned to let go of the rage and bitterness, to forgive himself for not seeing the signs, and to embrace a future free from deceit. His days grew fuller, slower but steadier. He nurtured friendships long neglected and started new ones cautiously, allowing himself to trust again. One afternoon, his phone rang. It was a familiar voice, Clara, an old friend who had checked in on him during his darkest days. "James, it's been a while. How are you holding up?" He smiled, warmth flooding through him. "Better than I thought I would. Thanks for asking." They arranged to meet for coffee, reconnecting over shared stories and laughter. For the first time, James felt the stirrings of hope, not for revenge or justice, but for joy. Months later, standing on a sunlit trail with his camera slung over his shoulder, James paused to take a picture of a blooming tree. The light caught his face, illuminating a genuine smile, the kind that comes from deep within. It was a simple moment, but for James, it was monumental. He was no longer the man shattered by betrayal and loss. He was reborn. Chapter 11. Epilogue. The park bench. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quiet city park. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead, scattering a few golden fragments onto the pathway. Megan sat alone on a weathered wooden bench beneath an aging oak tree. Her hands rested loosely in her lap, fingers trembling slightly, not from the cold, but from the emptiness that clung to her like a second skin. Around her, life moved on with careless rhythm. Children laughed as they chased after frisbees. Joggers passed with steady strides. Couples strolled hand in hand, their soft conversations blending into the ambient hum of the city. Megan's eyes flicked to a pair sitting a little way down the path. A man and a woman. They looked happy, carefree, even. The man's laugh was deep and genuine, the woman's smile bright and tender. Something about them made Megan's heart constrict painfully. The man wore a baseball cap pulled low, but she recognized the familiar tilt of his head, the relaxed posture, the same easy confidence she once knew. "James." Her throat tightened. She opened her mouth, desperate to speak, to call out, but the words caught and died somewhere deep inside. She swallowed hard, lifting her gaze just in time to see James glance over his shoulder. But instead of slowing or turning toward her, he continued walking briskly beside the woman, their hands brushing gently, fingers intertwined. Megan's fingers curled around the bench's rough edge, nails biting into the wood. For a moment, it felt like the years of betrayal and heartbreak were compressed into a single sharp point inside her chest. She wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to beg for forgiveness or mercy. But there was no one left to hear. The park felt vast and empty, despite the people all around her. Megan's mind wandered back to the last few months, the arrest, the media storm, the empty silence of her phone, the cold looks of former friends and family. She had lost everything. Her job, her home, her reputation. The house she once filled with laughter was now just a memory. Monica's divorce had stripped Jake of his last remnants of stability, and Amber's silence was a wall she couldn't breach. She had thought she could survive it all. She had told herself she could start anew. But now, sitting here, watching life move on without her, the truth was undeniable. She was alone. A soft rustle beside her made Megan turn her head slightly. An elderly man with a cane had taken a seat on the bench at the other end. He looked at her with kind eyes, as if sensing the storm inside her. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" he said gently. Megan managed a faint nod. The man smiled warmly. "Sometimes it helps to watch the world move around you, to remember there's still life beyond pain." Megan's eyes welled up. "I used to have a life," she whispered. "Sometimes," he said, "losing what we thought was everything is the first step toward finding what truly matters." Megan looked away, biting her lip to keep from breaking down. She glanced again toward James and the woman. They had paused now, laughing softly, sharing a moment that wasn't hers. Her voice trembled as she finally spoke aloud, barely audible. "James," but he was already turning the corner, fading from sight. The woman gave him a gentle squeeze on the arm, their smiles glowing in the golden light. Megan's breath hitched, and she closed her eyes, tears spilling silently. She stayed there long after the couple disappeared, until the sky deepened into twilight and street lamps flickered on one by one. The park emptied around her, leaving only the whisper of the wind and the faint echo of memories. Her hands had loosened from the bench's edge, resting quietly now. A lone figure among strangers, unseen, forgotten. Megan took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to simply be, without anger, without hope, without expectation. The world moved on, and so would she.